Dear Dad, when I was younger, I made you a lot of promises and I told you I'd do a lot of wonderful things. I told you that I would run a marathon. I told you I would be a part of the Olympic Games. I told you that I would leave our town, I'd go to university, do what nobody ever did from our estate. I'd get a job with an actual salary and an actual pension. Proper job. I told you I'd get married, I'd buy a house, and I'd be happy. I told you I'd stand up and be counted. I told you I'd lead people and that I would make a difference, and I'd make you proud. I told you that I'd get so big that when I performed, I'd have Sinead O'Connor as my warm-up. Thank you. I've achieved each of these things, just like I promised, but you won't know that because you chose not to be here. I made some other promises too. I'm not done yet, because I won't stop. They're my 3 words that get me by when times are really hard. I won't stop. I told you one day I'd be a doctor. I won't stop until I do. I told you I'd break a world record. I won't stop until it happens. That world record, by the way, will be next year. I'm going to run the fastest ever marathon wearing a suit. 3 hours and 24 minutes currently. I told you I'd have kids, loads of them. Still need to get the wife on board, but I'm fairly confident that will happen. Although maybe not loads by the daggers I'm getting right now. I also told you that you'd be a brilliant granddad, the sort who has kids climbing all over him like a performing monkey, a happy-go-lucky, hands-on granddad who would give the world to his grandchildren. I'll never know that because you chose not to be here. You also chose not to be here for your daughter's wedding. I had both the honour and dread of walking down the aisle with her. I couldn't help but feel I shouldn't be there. She has 2 kids now. You'd love them to pieces if you decided not to leave us. They couldn't not bring a smile to your face. We had tough times growing up. Looking back, I don't think I realised back then just how tough those times were. Mainly because despite the shit that was thrown at you and Mum, you deflected every single bit of it past us. Not once did I feel vulnerable, even when I saw you and Mum on your knees desperately bailing out our boat. To your own detriment, you both worked to give us the good memories that far override the bad ones I have. I remember watching you sob with joy when I told you I got good GCSEs. I felt so awkward to see tears rolling down your face, but I revelled in that pride. I was so happy to be able to make you so unashamedly emotional, something that frankly a man wouldn't do, as you told me when I was a kid. That first time you tried to kill yourself, when I was 16, was one of the worst days of my life. It was probably worse than the day you actually died. The shock and horror of it was overpowering and hit me like a truck. Thank God you failed. Thank God our family and closest friends rallied around me, because despite my school knowing about it, despite our GP knowing about it, nobody came to help, nobody came to check on us. We lost in that lottery because they buried their heads in the sand through not knowing how to approach the issue, or because they felt it wasn't their job to help me at my most vulnerable. I even asked for help once. My teacher said I should talk to our head of year, who in turn told me she didn't have time because she was marking exam papers. The 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th times you tried to kill yourself were all obviously really bad, but I thought each and every time was inevitable. That's a hard feeling to deal with. I do thank God that you have awful geography skills though, because that other time when you told me you were driving to Beachy Head to drive off it and you just crossed the Welsh border made me realise that sometimes you can smile even when things get bad. I'm sorry for the relief I felt on the 7th and final time that you tried and succeeded in killing yourself. I couldn't help it. Every time my phone rang from age 16 to 19 and Melissa's number came up, my heart sank. When she told me, I realised I'd never hear those words again. Kev, Dad's dead. I'm sorry that I didn't cry straight away and that I went into autopilot. I was sad, honestly I was. But the feeling of relief that I'd never hear those words again was overriding. On the train journey home that evening, I remembered that time that you voluntarily sectioned yourself and you spent 24 hours in a secure unit in a specialist hospital. I remember that after 24 hours you decided you weren't as crazy as the other people in the unit, and so you discharged yourself. I remember that you then proceeded to walk the 17 miles home in your pyjamas and slippers. You obviously weren't that crazy. I still can't believe that nobody followed up on that and not a single person from the health services thought it might be courteous to see if you were alright, that your feet didn't hurt at least. But then you did decide to discharge yourself, so you must have been of sound mind. To me, I feel the health services wouldn't withhold treatment from a terminally ill patient, and they'd chase them up if they missed a life-saving appointment. I can't help but believe you were terminally ill, and were just left to get on with it. When I got home the night you died, and I went and picked up Bod, who was staying at Grandad's house, it was tough. He was 15 at the time. I tried not to cry when I held him, and promised we'd be okay. That's the worst line, this one. Do you think Dad was thinking of us when he died? Bod asked me. I didn't know what to say. I hope you were, though. I hope you were smiling a little bit inside. I was scared, but ready to face it head on with the support of the people I knew and loved. I was a bit taken aback when a very close friend saw me in the street, and instead of coming and talking to me and asking how I was, he ducked into a shop. I haven't spoken to him since. Not because I don't want to, but because he didn't want to at the time, and we've never quite made that up. He did text me once and said he didn't know what to say. It never crossed my mind, but suicide appeared to be a dirty way to die. Shameful and selfish almost. Luckily, Melissa, Bod, Mum and I just saw it as a way to die. It is just a way to die. We held our heads up high as a matter of fact, and not because we were making some sort of stand. I did have one distinct wobble though. A friend saw I was upset the night before your funeral, and he said, look mate, let's make the funeral a celebration of your dad's life, not a sad and miserable day. I'm sorry Dad, I couldn't do that. The only time I will ever celebrate somebody's life is when that somebody chooses life, not when they choose to end it. I was sad on that day, and although I look back on the good times fondly, that day was about you deciding not to be here anymore. It's a day that haunts me, and carrying your coffin was one of the toughest things I've ever done. I'd say almost as tough as this. Life went on though, we all knew that, so I went back to uni, and I excelled in the most part. And 2 weeks after you died, I took up playing rugby again. I'd given up when you were really ill, because, well, I don't know why. It just felt right at the time. I thought it'd be a good way to remember you because of how you gave everything for me when we were younger. You took me to training 3 nights a week. We had no money. You borrowed people's cars, but you got me there. I always promised I'd put you in a good home when I was rich. I'm sorry, but maybe I'll buy you a bigger plot one day. I had a terrible injury my first game back. A fractured dislocation of my shoulder meant I was never allowed to play rugby again. I cried when the doctor told me. I'd lost my dad, and lost the sport which linked me to my dad. I sought help from my tutor at uni. He said I could hand my assignments in late, and he sent me on my way. That didn't feel enough for me. I needed more help. After that meeting, nobody ever mentioned it again. I just got on with university life. They buried their heads. You're like this though. I went and saw a hypnotist to see if he would help. I had a session with him, and I felt obliged to pretend to be under his spell because I didn't want to offend him. It did help though, because for most of the session, I sat trying not to laugh at what you'd say to me if you were there. I started jogging, and it turned into a bit of an obsession. I realised it was often my only opportunity to be on my own with my thoughts, and I realised that if I thought a lot when I ran and I cried because I was sad, nobody was there to see I was running too fast to be noticed. When I ran, I also realised that as a result of you not being here, I had more resilience than anybody else. I was more determined than anyone I knew, and I knew that because you weren't here anymore, I had no fear. What possibly could knock me down after you weren't here with me anymore? If I could deal with you deciding you didn't want to be here, I could deal with anything. So when I did my first marathon, and my body told me I wanted to stop after 18 miles, I said to myself, I won't stop. Because my mind is so much stronger than the rest of me. I don't know anybody that is stronger than I am. I never felt pain like that marathon, Dad. I cried afterwards. I cried on my own for ages, absolutely spent, doubled over in pain and deliriously uncomfortable. I now chase that pain. It makes me feel closer to you. It's hard to explain why, but I think it's because it's the closest I can get myself to feel how you were at your lowest. When I get to my lowest ebb in a race and I feel like I can't go on anymore, I do go on, because I'm not you. When everything tells me to stop, to give in and say no more, I won't stop. I never want to feel like you did. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to feel so alone and helpless, despite having so many hands held out to help you. But I do like to remind myself what it's like to struggle, because it makes me appreciate how easy I have it and how good my life is. It does make it hard to understand when you couldn't take a hold of one of our hands, and I'll never understand why you felt so alone, and I struggle to comprehend why you felt it necessary to take your own life. But I don't dwell on it. What's the point in thinking what might have been? I've been asked if I ever got angry at you. As you said to me many times when I was younger, I'm not angry, just disappointed. I've been asked if I ever felt you were selfish for doing it. I don't. I don't have a right to. I've been asked if I regretted anything. There's no point. I've also been asked how you did it, where you were found, if you left a suicide note and what that note said. I'm really sorry, Dad, but I told each of those people to shove their questions up their arse. It doesn't matter, you're dead. It's that simple. My nearest and dearest have never asked me those things, because they're insignificant and unnecessary. The questions, not my nearest and dearest. The media don't see it like that, though. They love to sensationalise things. Just yesterday I saw an article about Gary Speed. It had the line, "Speed, who was found hanged," like that really matters. Like the reader needs to know it. That needs to change. I won't stop until it does. The inquest into his death didn't present a verdict of suicide, you know. The coroner couldn't be sure that he meant to kill himself. I struggle to find another reason for why that might be. Maybe they were scared because suicide's so final, it's such a dirty word. I wrote a blog about Gary Speed, and it was published in The Guardian. I know you read The Sun, but I have a degree now, so I have to read proper papers. Anyway, Dad, let me tell you about some amazing things that have happened in my life, because times have been great. I don't dwell. I really can't believe how lucky I am. After graduating from uni and getting a good job and all that, I decided I need to make a difference. So as well as running marathons, I started blogging about my adventures. People enjoyed the blogs, and as the marathon running got more serious, so did the blogging and the following. There are these two things around these days called Facebook and Twitter, by the way. You wouldn't understand them because A, you're old, and B, you're dead. It started to upset me that people would still not talk about suicide in everyday life. People always went a bit funny when they asked how your dad died, and I said, "You killed yourself." They always said they were sorry. It felt like they were saying sorry for asking, not for the fact that you were dead. So I got on my soapbox and I challenged people to talk about it. Last year, Dad, I ran 52 marathons in a year, one every single week. I don't like running, you know, but it did get a lot of people talking, to show people that I could walk the walk as well as talk the talk. I raised a reasonable amount of money, but more importantly, I led by example. I got people joining me to say the S word and to promise to spread that word. I have more incredible experiences of it. I went to Las Vegas on my stag do and I ran a marathon there. I made my best men do it too. That's right, Dad. I got married. It says a lot that happiness makes me cry just as much as sadness. I got married. You should have seen her. She looked incredible. You looked incredible. She makes my world spin around. It was everything I want in a wife and more. It's just a shame You chose not to be there. A newspaper called me crazy for running a marathon on my wedding day. Quite funny considering I was running for a mental health charity. People got involved though. One lady heard about what I was doing. She bought me a flight to New York to do the New York Marathon. I was instilling hope in people, she said. I was leading the way in getting the message out there that suicide wasn't a dirty word. I had lots of people get in touch with me and tell me I was doing great. I also had a few people get in touch and tell me they needed help, that they were considering killing themselves. They asked me to help them. I couldn't, and it scared me. At times I thought I was in too deep, but we're trying to address that. It's why there's training available called Assist, where people can train to become better prepared to detect and support those at risk of killing themselves. The more people we can get talking about suicide and doing that sort of training, the better. Maybe your first, second, third and so on attempts wouldn't have happened. Do you remember 1992, Dad, the Barcelona Olympics, when we were screaming at Sally Gunnell and when we took the mickey out of Mum for staring at Linford's lunchbox? I told you one day I'd be a part of the Olympics. Well, this year the Olympics came to Great Britain. I wish I could have watched it with you. It was amazing. One of the best years of my life. And I was a part of it. I was one of the cogs that turned because I got to carry the Olympic flame. It was one of the many rewards I got for saying I won't stop and campaigning against the stigma associated with suicide. I've even got to keep my torch, and it takes pride of place in the downstairs loo. You'd have loved it and you'd have cheered the loudest. It was one of the biggest honours of my life to be a part of those games. But I'll be honest with you, Dad, I wish I never got to carry it, because that would mean I was one of the naive and you hadn't chosen to die. I took my torch into schools in the days after I carried it too, to show it off to the children, to let them have photos taken with it. You always told me to share. One school raised lots of money and a little girl came up to me with a picture she drew. It said, "Thank you for helping us to raise money to help sad people." I cried when I got in the car. Just before an assembly at another school, a member of staff thanked me for taking the torch in. She said to me, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell the children how your dad died." I cried when I got in the car. Much like with my marathons, I won't stop. I will plough on until suicide rates drop, until those who want help know where to get it, and until we stop burying our heads in the sand. I'm everything I want to be in my life, and that is down to you. Unfortunately, it's down to you deciding you didn't want to be here. I'm making more of my life now than I ever did before, because the way I see it, you can't go back and change yesterday, but you can use yesterday to change tomorrow. I can't bring you back to life, but I can use your death to show others that there is hope, that we can strengthen protective factors in our lives, and that together we can help people celebrate the fact that they've chosen life. You don't know how important you've been in making me the man I am, because you're not here. You chose not to be here. But then would I be this man if you were? You're my inspiration, and your death is the reason I'm here. My childhood with you gave me the strength to deal with your death, and I see through the dark enough to realise I can help to instil hope in others, to use the loss of your life as a catalyst to encourage others, to see that it's not the only way, there are other roads to take. I love you, Dad. Don't stop inspiring me, and I won't stop remembering you. And so, ladies and gents, they're the things I want to say. That I love my dad, that I never ever wanted to stand on this stage, I never wanted to meet any of you, but I will meet thousands more people like you, and I'll continue to meet you people until the world shouts together that suicide's not a dirty word, it's just another word in the dictionary. Thank you.